to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Luis Nery took to his social media and posted a caption that reads,
Anuncio oficial, pronto.
Translated means an official announcement will be made shortly, likely in reference to the Inoue fight that we all know by now they've been working on. The real appeal, the real attraction of Inoue versus Luis Nery, as Luis Nery really isn't perceived as being the same level of fighter as Naoya Inoue, is the backstory, is what Luis Nery did to another Japanese fighter some years ago, Shinsuke Yamanaka. But there are glaring differences between Nery versus Yamanaka and Nery versus Inoue, one of which is the fighters' ages. On the premise of what Nery did to Yamanaka, he thinks he can do the same thing to Inoue. That's what he thinks. Shinsuke Yamanaka fight took place down there at 118 pounds, whereas this fight is going to be up there at 122. The Shinsuke Yamanaka fight, Shinsuke, he was about 34 years old when he fought Nery. He was in his mid-30s, whereas Inoue is a younger man. Inoue's 30 years old, in his physical prime, at his physical peak, at the peak of his powers, and he is not here and now in his career where Yamanaka was when he fought Luis Nery. Both Shinsuke and Luis, they're southpaws, whereas Inoue, he's an orthodox fighter. And Shinsuke, for as good a fighter as he was never perceived as being of the same caliber, of the same ilk, as what we see in Naoya Inoue here today. And you say that, well, if Shinsuke Yamanaka is in fact such a far cry from the fighter that Inoue is here today, then what's the backstory? What's supposed to make this fight so appealing? And I reiterate, it's because Luis Nery, on the premise of what he did to Shinsuke, he thinks he can do that to Inoue, and he's been calling him out for well over a year now. It's a gross oversimplification. Already seen Luis Nery stopped in the subsequent years that followed the two Shinsuke Yamanaka fights. He was stopped by Brandon Figueroa, and I happen to think Naoya Inoue has a lot more firepower and precision, among other things, but I think Inoue is a stronger puncher than Brandon Figueroa. What makes you say that? The Stephen Fulton fight. Inoue handled Stephen Fulton much easier than Brandon Figueroa did, but unlike Brandon Figueroa, he actually knocked him out. He actually stopped him. When Brandon Figueroa fought Stephen Fulton, it was an all-out war. It was a shootout. Brandon's punches were landing, but he didn't knock him out. Whereas Inoue deconstructed him, and if you were paying attention, Inoue's punches were more damaging to Stephen Fulton than Brandon Figueroa's punches were damaging to that same Stephen Fulton. So on that predication, I think Inoue's got more firepower than Brandon Figueroa. Brandon, who stopped Luis Nery. And if Brandon can stop Luis Nery, I think Inoue can stop Luis Nery. Brandon is no technician. He throws punches in bunches, and that's about it. He's a volume guy, and he landed a high volume of punches on Luis Nery. So if Brandon can stop that guy, if he's got enough power to do it, I think Inoue has enough power to do it. Luis Nery at his very best is a pressure guy. He's a brawler. He's a volume guy. Opens up quite a bit, and there's plenty of opportunities there to catch him in between the shots, in between the punches. Inoue has the speed, the accuracy, and the power. I think he can stop him. For Inoue, it's a special assignment. Vengeance, in a manner of speaking. Vengeance for his countryman, Shinsuke Yamanaka, and I'm sure there are plenty of Japanese that would love to see Inoue do this guy. Sounds like he's about to. An official announcement is pending, per the news desk of Luis Nery. We'll see what happens. In men's super lightweight news, Hall of Fame inductee Timothy Bradley recently weighed in on IBF champion Subriel Matias, saying a guy like Matias would murder Ryan Garcia, among some others, if they had the balls to share the ring with him in the near future and not the distant one. Bradley, from the comfort of his home, watched Garcia's every move in his last fight. Once it was all over, he was lukewarm on his performance. From Bradley's point of view, Garcia is a decent contender, but if his handlers were to throw him in there with Subriel Matias, of all people, the super lightweight division's IBF champion, he'd be leaving the ring on a stretcher. Presently, the boxing world is filled with heavy hitters, but Matias might be one of the most violent men on the planet. Ryan Garcia, in spite of campaigning at 140 pounds, same weight as Matias, why do you think Ryan versus that guy really isn't a conversation? Why do you think that doesn't have any momentum? And what about Romero, the current reigning WBA champion at that same weight, who's on the same side of the street that Matias has been on, the PBC side? Since he became a champion, why do you think a fight between him and Subriel never became a conversation? Why isn't it a conversation now? Unsurprisingly, his 2023 has accentuated just how deadly he can be. To kick off his year, Matias got some get back against Jeremias Ponce, stomping the only man who initially beat him via 5th round stoppage. More recently, Matias kept things going by stopping Shohan Ergashev just a few weeks ago. Matias, 31, is someone that Bradley reveres. With that said, he isn't the only 140-pounder that he believes would wipe the floor with Ryan Garcia if given the chance. I agree with Tim. I think Devin Haney would beat Ryan Garcia in one-sided fashion. I think Teofimo would beat him as well. Of course, Subriel Matias, the centerpiece of this conversation, I think he'd put Ryan in the hospital. What separates Subriel from the rest of the bunch is that he's an older guy than the rest of these guys, and Teofimo, then Devin, then Ryan, then Rolly. Subriel's 31 years old, whereas these kids, they're in their mid-20s. He's a grown man with grown man strength. Who's killed a man before, killed a man in the ring. And as much as they'd like to pretend that they're willing to share the ring with him, I think the majority of the somebodies at 140 pounds, they don't want nothing to do with this guy. They're pretending that they do, but underneath it all, it's too risky.
Yeah.
It's too dangerous right now.
Yeah.
Their best bet is to wait him out.
Yeah.
Wait until he gets older and starts to slow down, or wait until making the weight becomes difficult to make, because right now, he's too dangerous. That doesn't mean he's invincible. No fighter is invincible. Everything has its time and its place, but at this time, he's too risky for those kids. And they're avoiding him. They all are, but Subriel, he's not taking this lying down. Subriel Matias is calling out these guys, and he's declaring himself the top dog of this division, even though there are 4 reigning champions at 140 pounds. You tell me which one of them really wants to fight this guy. Who's gonna challenge him on that claim? On paper, it's Teofimo because he beat Josh Taylor, and Josh Taylor was lineal champion, lineal and Ring Magazine champion at this weight, so on paper, it's Teofimo. But if Teofimo were fighting him in his next fight, instead of Jermaine Ortiz, how do you think that would go? How do you think that would end? Subriel Matias stated, no chickens, no jokers, just Matias. Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, Rolly Romero. The best 140-pounder is here. No Teofimo Lopez, he's a pussy. No Ryan Garcia. Who's Ryan Garcia? Said Subriel Matias on social media, saying he's the best fighter at junior welterweight. No Haney, no chicken, no Rolly Romero. He's a joker. Oftentimes we see fights like this not happen, fights between Subriel and those fighters, and the explanations are convoluted. They are. It's no need to overcomplicate things. No need. He's too dangerous. That's why they don't want to fight him. That's why you don't see his name mentioned alongside Ryan Garcia's or Rolly Romero's. That's why the Lopez people made that offer in bad faith, knowing that Subriel was injured and he wouldn't be able to fight. That's when they decided to make him an offer. That's why Bill Haney lied, claiming that Subriel priced himself out, asking for $4 million, except he got that quote from Peter Khan, who doesn't even manage Subriel, and he got caught in that lie, caught red-handed. Ask yourself a question.
What?
Now that we all know Devin's not fighting Ryan next, do you think they're going to revisit a Subriel Matias fight? That's assuming they ever visited that fight at all. Bill lied, and everybody knows it. He lied to everybody's face because he doesn't want to put his son in that fight. He knows it wasn't going to happen then. It's not going to happen now. And when it doesn't happen, people are going to ask, well, Devin's a champion and so is Subriel. You're campaigning at the same weight. Why not make the fight happen? And it's because Subriel is too fucking dangerous. Maybe later on. Get into the whole risks versus rewards deal, the whole risks versus rewards situation, because if it was somebody else holding that IBF title, all these guys might be more receptive to fighting for it, but because he's got it. If Jose Ramirez were IBF champion instead of Subriel Matias, I can guarantee you all these guys would be more receptive to fighting Jose for that belt than they are to fight Subriel for that belt, and it's because Jose's not as dangerous. No need to beat around the bush or overcomplicate what is not a complicated situation. If you've been watching Subriel fight by fight, I think he stopped the last 5 guys he was in the ring with.
In the way that he stopped him.
What I think is going on. All the other somebodies at 140 pounds have made a silent decision, a decision jointly, that they don't want no parts of this guy, and they're gonna freeze him out. Act like he's not there, act like he doesn't exist.
Some will pretend they publicly reached out to him in order to save face, because underneath it all, they know they don't want him. They know they're not gonna fight him.
Men's welterweight news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now. The latest from Errol Spence Jr., who said, "I had to get cataract surgery. It's been past due. Shit was covering my eye. Why do you think I got hit with so many jabs and hooks?" In the Crawford fight, that's the fight he's talking about, still a great performance by Bro, which some are already gravitating towards and latching on to as an excuse for what was Errol Spence Jr.'s performance. His performance against Terrence Crawford, their long-awaited showdown. For those not familiar with what cataracts are and how they might impede a fighter's performance, the main symptom of cataracts is blurry vision. Having cataracts can be like looking through a cloudy window. The expected recovery time for cataract surgery, well, most people are able to return to work or their normal routines in 1 to 3 days after the eye heals. They may still need to wear glasses, especially for reading. The incisions from surgery could heal within 1 week after surgery, but it's still important that you avoid getting water in your eyes and closing your eyes. In the case of Errol Spence Jr., I think it would be important to not get punched in the face.
That would help a lot, but if he ends up fighting Terrence Crawford for a second time, it's inevitable. It's inevitable that he's gonna get punched in the face. It's gonna happen.
For anyone out there, any Errol Spence Jr. supporter telling themselves this is it and this will make all the difference, any wide-eyed optimist who's chalking up Errol Spence Jr.'s one-sided loss, that one-sided beating, to cataracts.
When did he develop the condition? Did he have cataracts in the Ugas fight? Because he beat the hell out of Ugas, and if you were okay to beat Ugas...
then that's no excuse for losing to Crawford. After he lost to Crawford, he said he was raised by a code to where men don't make excuses. But that's exactly what he's doing when he says, "Why do you think I got hit with so many jabs and so many hooks?"
Those sound like excuses.
Excuses that his supporters will readily latch onto because they've been scrambling for something to use, something they can say ever since that fight to explain why the opposite of what they said would happen happened. They said that Errol would be too big and too strong, that he would overpower Terrence Crawford, that he would knock him out. And the exact opposite happened. What happened was what I've been telling you would happen for approximately 5 years now. Errol Spence Jr., simply put, he's a good fighter, but he's not in Terrence Crawford's league.
And he never was.
Because he's too simple. His approach is too basic. Do you know how many people got angry with me when I've said that over the years, that Errol doesn't change much from one fight to the next, that all that really changes is who he's fighting, but not how he's fighting. And when he is so confronted with Terrence Crawford, it's going to be one-sided. Terrence is going to beat him from pillar to post.
When I said that Terrence Crawford across 3 divisions, he's come up against more different base styles than Errol Spence Jr. has, and Terrence has more experience facing other southpaws than Errol has.
That Terrence has more ways of fighting a fight than Errol has, and while Errol is a good fighter and he's a solid fighter, a solid champion, he's just not on Terrence Crawford's level. What further example do you need of this than their initial meeting, their first fight? If there is to be a second, I think Terrence does him quicker.
If Errol's lucky, Terrence knocks him out in the first couple of rounds because he can't afford to take another sustained beating like the one he just took.
In light of this news, I'm already seeing the usual suspects gravitating towards this cataract business and latching onto it as the explanation for why they were so wrong in calling the outcome of this fight. For some time now, they've been using weight, the weight at which the contest took place, as their primary excuse. But how else was it supposed to be an undisputed title fight if it wasn't at 147? And Errol...
He never said the weight was an issue. Neither did Derek James. Hell, Derek James said the opposite. He said the weight wasn't an issue. It wasn't a problem.
That hasn't stopped Errol Spence Jr.'s fans from using that as an excuse, and some content creators here on YouTube. So let's just get our cards on the table, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Here's what it is.
Yeah.
These guys don't want to admit they're wrong. It's just another case of sour grapes in the sport of boxing. They're latching on to whatever they can latch on to, looking for something to believe in. So when Errol comes out and says that he had cataract surgery,
They run with it.
they need something to believe in. Some of the content creators here on YouTube, some of which might actually know better. And they don't actually like Errol's chances going into a second fight. They'll pretend they do, so they have something to talk about on their channels. Something to tell their subscribers, the ones who listened to them the first time when they said that Errol would beat Terrence. Here and now that he's been beaten himself,
They've got some explaining to do.
and this is their explanation. Weight drained this, cataracts that.
It's tell-them age.
Yeah.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
But it's what they're willing to resort to.
These people ain't got no shame, and they don't know shit about boxing. I don't know how you can have so many boxing channels full of people that don't know shit about boxing, because these are the people that told you Fulton was gonna beat Inoue, that Spence was gonna beat Crawford. These are the people that love Deontay Wilder and making excuses for him. The only people out there that are willing to make more excuses than Deontay Wilder are his fans.
These channels.
And ever since the first fight, I've often wondered as to whether or not there will be a second. Even though Errol activated his rematch clause, he can always call it off. He can always walk away. In truth, I think he should, as I think he might end up taking another sustained beating. That if he's lucky, Crawford will kill him quick, because he can't afford to get beat the hell up in 8 rounds or 9 rounds or however long it was, like he did before. That the financial incentive to do a rematch, it's hardly there when the first fight was so lopsided.
Who's gonna buy it?
The mystery is gone. The mystique that was built up over 5 years, the question as to what would happen if you put Errol in the ring with Terrence, we got our answer. We all saw what happened, and you think people are gonna pay to see it again?
And how are they gonna pay the fighters?
Showtime are the ones that paid to do the fight the first time, and I'm sure it costed Showtime a pretty penny. But Showtime is out of boxing. The PBC have jumped into bed with Amazon Prime, and rumor has it, the deal with Amazon, it's not like the Showtime deal. Amazon's not giving them a budget to do fights throughout the calendar year. Amazon isn't shelling out any cash for the PBC's content. All they're doing is distributing that content.
So if the rumors are true, and Amazon's not giving them any money, how do they pay the guarantees to the fighters? And if they're not paying guarantees to the fighters, are the fighters even gonna want to do this fight?
Questions that need answers, but the bottom line here is cataracts or no cataracts. If Errol Spence Jr. climbs into that ring with Terrence for a second time, I got Terrence stopping him again, and perhaps worse than a FaceTime.